On Mother's Day, I decided to spend it alone in memory of my recently departed mother. Everyone else had their own plans, and I found some peace knowing I'd have time to reflect and remember her. I decided to drive to the house where she spent her final years. The house, nestled in the countryside, far from the highway and surrounded by fields and dense forests, always had a quiet, nostalgic air I cherished. Upon arrival, everything appeared as it had always been, except for one thing. All the windows were tightly shut, and the front door was locked, just as I had left it on my last visit. Stepping inside, the house smelled musty, like things long forgotten. I began to clean up a bit, opening windows to let in fresh air. As I worked, I felt at peace, though not without a tinge of sadness. As the sun began to set, I decided to take a walk around the house. Passing through the living room, the dim light revealed the photos on the walls. I noticed something peculiar. In some of the photos, it seemed someone had deliberately blurred my mother's face. Curious and slightly anxious, I examined the other photos. The same situation. My mother's face was erased, while the others remained intact. A fear I couldn't explain started to creep into my mind. I thought I should leave, but a strong curiosity kept me there. Venturing deeper into the house, I noticed that the door to my mother's bedroom was ajar. I was sure I had closed it when I last left. With my heart pounding, I pushed the door open and entered. The room was pitch dark, lit only by the light of the moon through the window cracks. Then I saw it. A large photo of my mother on the wall, but this time not only her face was erased. The photo was torn to shreds, leaving only fragments. As I continued to stare at the tattered photo on the wall, another detail became starkly clear. In the fragments of the photo, I noticed a shadowy figure reflected back from the glass. It seemed to be standing right behind me. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was no one there, just the empty, cold room. However, the feeling of being watched did not diminish. Despite my fear, I decided to explore behind the room. In the darkness, I found a small door I had never noticed before. It led down to a dark basement I didn't know existed. With each step, the air became more oppressive and colder. I smelled the strong scent of mold and something worse, the smell of decay. At the end of the basement, I discovered a small room with an old desk and several old film reels. On the desk, there was a rusted metal box. Curious yet apprehensive, I opened it. Inside were undeveloped photos, all of my mother, but each shared a terrifying commonality. Her face was obscured or cut out of the picture. As I flipped through each photo, a whisper sounded from behind me, making me spin around. No one was there. The whispering continued, seeming to come from the opposite wall. I approached and discovered a small speaker hidden within the wall. The whispers became clearer, sounding like a plea or a warning. Suddenly, all the lights in the basement went out, leaving me in total darkness. In the dark, I felt movement not far from where I stood. A large, vague shape slowly advanced towards me in the darkness. My heart seemed to stop as I tried to find an escape, but every direction appeared blocked. I backed away, trying to remain calm as the shape became more distinct. It wasn't the shadow of a person, but something else, undefined yet clearly malevolent. In the last whisper from the speaker, I heard a sentence.
"Don't come back."
I don't remember how I ran out of there. I only know that as I burst out of the house and back to my car, the dim light of dawn was beginning to filter through the trees. I started the car and never looked back, deciding there were some secrets best left unexplored. Last year, on a seemingly innocent Mother's Day weekend, my boyfriend and I planned a visit to his parents' secluded cabin high in the Colorado mountains. I had yet to meet his parents, and I was excited about the trip, seeing it as a perfect opportunity to get acquainted and experience the beauty of Colorado for the first time. My boyfriend had prepped me a bit about his family. His parents were described as quite normal, though his mother had been confined to a wheelchair due to permanent leg paralysis. This detail didn't bother me. I was determined to make her feel comfortable and treated as I would anyone else. The day we arrived at the cabin, the weather was splendid. We enjoyed a lovely evening, grilling steaks and sharing drinks as the sun dipped below the mountainous horizon. The celebration was heartwarming, his parents both exuding genuine kindness and warmth. However, the tranquility of the evening gave way to horror after we retired for the night. We were staying in the guest bedroom, and around 2 a.m., a strange noise woke me from a deep sleep. The room was engulfed in darkness, and at first I dismissed the noise as just the cabin settling or the wind outside. But then, in the gloom, I witnessed something horrifying. In the corner of the room, there was movement. Not just any movement. My boyfriend's mother was there, crawling on the floor. It wasn't an ordinary crawl. She was contorted into a crab walk, her back grotesquely arched as she moved unnaturally around the room, emitting a disturbing slurping noise and sniffing the air like a wild animal. Panic gripped me. This was a woman who, to my knowledge, couldn't even move her legs, yet here she was, skulking about our bedroom in the dead of night as if possessed by some nocturnal spirit. My heart raced. I was frozen in fear, but managed to force myself to lie back down, feigning sleep. Moments later, I felt her hot breath against my face, her sniffing intense and unsettling. I kept my eyes tightly shut, pretending to be deep in sleep, praying for her to leave. After what felt like an eternity, she finally retreated, leaving the room as silently as she had entered. I spent the rest of that night wide awake, every small sound sending shivers down my spine. By morning, I was both exhausted and eager to leave. We packed up early and I maintained a calm facade as we said our goodbyes. As I hugged his mother, she leaned in close and whispered chillingly, "I know you were awake last night." Her smile as we departed was twisted, a silent threat hanging in the air. I haven't spoken of that night to anyone, especially not my boyfriend. The memory of her demented smile haunts me, and the thought of returning to that cabin for another Mother's Day fills me with dread. He has mentioned going back, but I know I have to tell him the truth. I cannot face that terror again. On my old truck, I drove down the gravel road to visit my mother on Mother's Day. The countryside was as peaceful yet desolate as ever. Since my father passed away, my mother had been living alone in a wooden house on the outskirts of town. This time, I decided to surprise her by not telling her I was coming. When I arrived, the front door of the house was wide open, which was unusual because my mother always made sure to lock it. I stepped inside, calling out for her, but there was no response. The house was eerily quiet, with only the monotonous ticking of the wall clock marking each passing second. I went straight to the living room and stopped dead in my tracks. There, under my mother's favorite armchair, was a dried pool of blood. My heart pounded, and my hands began to tremble as I searched the house but found no sign of her. Wrapped in anxiety, I rushed outside to check around the house. In the yard, faint footprints led to an old storage shed behind the garden. The door was locked from the outside. I broke the lock and opened the door, and a foul stench hit me. Inside, dim light from the dirty windows revealed a horrifying scene. 2 disfigured bodies, one of which might be my mother's. Under the flashlight of my phone, I recognized my mother's wedding ring on one of the distorted hands. My heart sank, and pain clenched as memories of her flooded back. Returning to the house to call the police, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the entrance. Inside the car, I found an old photo of my mother with a strange man and a child. The man looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. When the police arrived, they examined the scene and began their investigation. I relayed everything I knew and what I had found, including the strange photo in the car. One of the officers recognized the man in the photo and informed me that he was a former lover of my mother's from many years ago, before she chose to live reclusively. The investigators later informed me that they had found fingerprints on the car and DNA samples in the shed. All matched the man from the photo, my mother's former lover, who had disappeared shortly after their relationship ended. It turned out he had come back to claim some possessions he believed were his, which led to a conflict and the ensuing tragedy. The pain and outrage overwhelmed me as I witnessed the final scene of my mother in that dark shed. Mother's Day, meant to be a time for love and connection, had turned into a nightmare I could never forget. Memories of my gentle, loving mother now existed only in photographs and fragments of the past. As the investigation continued and the man was sought, I spent time reflecting on what was lost and what remained. The house, once again, became a place of emptiness, each room echoing with echoes of the past and every wall harboring untold stories.